Hi everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. So I'll be teaching you how to paint or how to layer a grapefruit. So still life is one of my favorite subjects to paint in watercolor, and pretty much almost everything I paint wet on wet, except whenever I paint architectural pieces. Let's say I'm painting a lantern or something like that, then I will definitely go with wet on dry. But with wet on wet, everything looks smoother. And if you haven't been familiar with my schools or my paintings, everything has kind of very smooth, soft look to it. So the key is wet on wet. So you wet the paper first and then you apply colors wet on wet. However, just like with everything, you actually want to start with undertones. So that's when you want to refer to a color wheel. Color wheel is extremely important. I know at first it feels like, oh, I don't want to even look at it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. But trust me, once you've passed that first phase and really focus on like the primary colors and secondary colors, that's all you really need to think about. And then everything makes sense. So with the grapefruits, they're green. So the color we start with is yellow. And why yellow? Because to create a shade of green, all you need is yellow and blue. So once you first layer that grapefruit with yellow, a shade of yellow, then you can start adding some green. You can still use green, or you don't have to, or you can just mix your yellow with the blue. However, I still use a shade of green, such as sap green. So I start with a yellow, then sap green with a little bit of yellow, and then to change the shade of that green, I add blue, a shade of blue. I prefer to go with a shade like phthalo blue, a red shade, which is a primary color according to Holbein's color chart. Another very important thing is to make sure you preserve that light for the highlights. That does not mean that the highlights need to be paper white. They don't. That's when you can use a little bit of blue for that highlight. You can even add a little bit of red if you want to, because this way the highlights will look more natural. But you also need to make sure that you have those shadows, because there's no dimension unless you have shadows. I'll be guiding you through in this portion of the class. If you would like to watch a full class, how to paint both of these grapefruits plus the leaves, please join me on Patreon. There's already over 5,000 members total. So I would like you to join me there as well. You will find lots of different classes. There's a beginner series, actually 2 beginner series. So anytime you have a question, you always ask me, of course, and I'm always there on the side or here on the side. Whatever you want to ask me questions, I'll share the links to like the basics if you need to know how to create your own shade of gray, for example. Or if you haven't even purchased watercolors yet, then I can guide you as far as like what colors you really need, because you don't need 100 of colors. Like you really can start with just a 10 or 12 colors and that's enough. So let's get to it. Hi everyone, welcome to this class. So we're going to paint these grapefruits, and I do have a test piece here that I finished earlier, and actually this was my first painting I did after being sick. So I took it very slow, and it kind of helps to kind of just think things through, and with that slower speed I was able to really focus on the blending of colors. And I'm saying all this because a lot of you probably don't have as much time to paint during the week, and sometimes like we find that window to paint something, but then we rush through, and a lot of times we might not be happy with our artwork. But it really is important to focus to study the reference image, to sit on it for a second, and to examine like the light and shadows and like how we're going to apply the first colors. So to have these steps ahead in your head, and that really helps. And then just take it slow, because that really helps, and it just relaxes you more. And so let's try that. And we're going to start with this one right here. This is 2 layers, and I'm going to keep this palette very simple. So we're going to use red, blue, yellow, and green, and that's all it really is. I do have like indigo here, so additional blue. Other than phthalo blue, red shade, I have indigo. And then for the main green, it's sap green. And then starting here with the yellow undertones, which is my imidazolong yellow. If I want to change the shade of that yellow, I'm going to either add a little bit of red to it to make it warmer, or I'm just going to start adding some of the green to it. So I'm going to place this on the side, and we're going to focus on this first grapefruit right here. I'm grabbing my long quill size 2 brush. So I'm gonna use this brush. I actually want to use just for now, a larger size brush, just so I have more coverage right away. Go slow along these lines. This sketch, by the way, as any other ones, are always available on Patreon. So you can download my sketch. This is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna grab a little bit of phthalo blue. This is more like a water to milk-like ratio. It's the amount of paint that you have on the brush. So try not to have too much paint, and just kind of circle it. This is where we have the highlight, right? I'm gonna grab a little more paint. So this is my highlight. Now there's another highlight, which is kind of like right here. So kind of circle it for yourself. Next, let's clean our brushes. And now we're gonna grab some of this imidazolone yellow. Try to have more like a, I guess it's also between water milk-like ratio. So there's my water milk-like ratio, but I want a little bit of sap green. And that became a little too thick, so that's why I grabbed a little more water. And now the tricky part is try to mix your colors on the paper. It's not really that tricky if you've painted for a while and if you followed my classes, but I noticed that it's maybe for some students maybe harder to kind of avoid that mixing, to mix too much the colors on the palette. You want to really quickly grab the color from here and come to your painting and start applying colors. This is more like a yellow grain. I'm going to grab a little more of the grain. I'm sorry, yellow. So imidazolone yellow. Now, where do I apply these colors? So I have some yellow and then I have a little bit of green. I'm looking for like the most yellowish parts, but also the green parts, because I want this yellow to be like an undertone. So to be like an undertone for the most like greenish, like a leafy green parts of the grapefruit. Now my test piece was done with 2 layers, but you can definitely do this with just 1 layer if you want to. I'm gonna pull it here a little bit. Now I want to start grabbing and adding a little more of the sap green. So now I have some sap green. I did clean my brush, so I still have some of this yellow. So this feels more like a greenish, whatever it feels more greenish, that's where you want to add it. This does feel a little too wet, but I can quickly just basically wipe my brush on a towel, and then I'll have less of that water. So if it feels too wet for you, just wipe slightly, like wipe your brush on a towel. Not too much though, because if your brush is feels too damp, like it's too dry, you're gonna start removing that paint from the painting too much. So I'm just going along this line here. And then whatever else I see that grain, which is kind of like here and here, and let's say here. But what I'm gonna do is grab some of this. Now I'm going for like a heavier ratio. So this needs to be more like a half and half. And I'm gonna grab some of the blue too. So this was sap green, and then I have phthalo blue, but I never cleaned my brush, so technically I still have some of the yellow. And then I'm just gonna go for these parts, some here, a little more of that blue. This needs to be more like a between half and half and heavy cream, so I'm going for like a heavier ratio between water and paint now. And that's because I have my initial wash in there. So this is more like about the vibrancy now. Creating vibrancy, right? Now, this is too highlighted. That's okay, because I'm not done with it yet. I will come back to it with that damp brush to move things around. It's just not quite there yet. Now, underneath the leaf is where we're gonna have that, that's where we're gonna have a shadow. Now, I do need a paper towel because I had a drop of water there and I don't want the paint to travel right outside there. Let's see, sap green. So this is like a heavy cream to cream top, and some of the phthalo blue. I'm gonna go towards the middle. Now I do need some red, and I'll talk more about why I'm grabbing red in just a second. I just want to make sure I can shape it nicely. We are working right now on shadows. If you have taken other classes with me, then you know exactly why I just grabbed some of that red. There you go. And then more of that red. Now again, heavy cream-like ratio between water and paint of the three colors together actually. So yellow, I'm sorry, the green, blue, and red. And red underneath this. Coming back here. Now if it's easier for you, go ahead and grab like a round 8 brush, for example. Pulling it just so I have a little more color here. I will be adding a second layer, just like in my test piece, for more vibrancy and to have that nice dimension here. Because I want a little more. Pulling, pulling. And here, there you go. And with the second layer, that's the thing, you can do so much. I'm gonna let this to dry. And then with that second layer, I will work on the contrast and just to make it more vibrant. When I see that the highlight has some color in it, and in this case it's like a blue violet, so follow blue with some quint red, that's when I know, okay, this is going to have that undertone layer. And so when you look at the highlight, this part is kind of really like white almost, and then you have the blue.